Today we will be measuring a blazer jacket. First, the measurer will flip the collar and lapels up. Grab the garment by the shoulders, gently shake, and lay the top area of the garment flat, beginning with neckline. The measurer will smooth the lapels flat as they overlap. Generally, due to the amount of shaping in a blazer at the bust and waist, the garment will not lay completely flat on the table. Therefore, you will need to smooth out one area at a time as you are measuring specific POMs. When measuring a specific area, you will smooth out all dragline and wrinkles, taking care not to stretch out the garment in the process. Here, we will begin measuring from the top area of the garment. When measuring the upper portion of a blazer, the measurer will shape the neckline and then push the bust fullness downward. We will also need to ensure that the garment is smoothed around the armhole, following the armhole shape of the body, not the sleeve. As you begin measuring, make sure to hide target specs to ensure that these targets do not influence your measurement results. After garment is laid flat, the measurer will have to identify the high point shoulder. Since this style has a forward shoulder seam of 5/8 inch at the neckline, the HPS is located at the fold at the neckline seam. Place a pin at the high point shoulder to ensure vertical specs are taken from the same place. Shoulder seam forward at the neck should be measured along the neckline curve. Shoulder seam forward at the armhole should be measured along the armhole seam. Align the edge of the ruler with the high point shoulder. Also, align a ruler at the bottom edge of the garment at the longest point. Next, we will measure all vertical specs. Center front body length is measured from high point shoulder to garment edge, where we have aligned the ruler at the longest point. Shoulder slope is measured from high point shoulder to highest point of shoulder at armhole. Center of button is measured from high point shoulder to the center of the button, making sure that the bust is smoothed downward. If there were a chest welt pocket, we would also measure its placement down from high point shoulder during this time. Now, without moving the garment, we will proceed to measure all of the horizontal specs except for the bust width, waist width, and bottom sweep. Since there is a lot of shaping in these areas, they will be measured using a different method later. First, we will start with the neck width. Neck width is measured from high point shoulder to high point shoulder. Ensure you are measuring at the fold, not the shoulder seam. Across shoulder is also measured at the fold of the garment, from armhole seam to seam. Again, since the shoulder seam is rolled forward 3/4 of an inch at the armhole, you measure the across shoulder at the highest point, not at the shoulder seam, unless otherwise specified. Next measurement is across front width. We will measure the cross front at a specific placement from high point shoulder. For this style, it is identified as 5 inches. Place a mark. Now measure seam to seam. Next, we will identify the waist placement and come back to this area later to measure, since we take this measurement at the lower half of the garment with the fullness pressed up. The waist placement is measured down from the top of the side seam or along the folded edge of the side panel if there is no side seam. We need to ensure that the garment is smoothed around the armhole, following the armhole shape of the body, not the sleeve. For this style, waist placement is at 5 7/8 of an inch down from the top. Place a mark. We will also prep the garment to measure bust width by pinning the lapels shut while the garment is in this position. Pinning the lapels shut may become necessary for certain fabrics. The bust is taken 1 inch down from the armhole seam while the garment is folded. Measure edge to edge. Since the waist and bottom sweep are at the lower half of the garment, we will pin the front overlap near the bottom hem and push the bust fullness upward to begin measuring these points. The front overlap amount on this style is 1.5 inches. The hem begins to curve at approximately 2 inches above the bottom hem edge. Gently pull garment flat at waist to measure waist width. Notice that there will still be fullness at the bottom hem. That is okay because the waist is flat. The waist is measured from edge to edge. The bottom opening is measured straight from edge to edge as well. Ensure that all of the fullness is smooth flat, especially at the back panels. Due to the style having a curved hem, the only way to measure this garment is straight. We would not choose to measure along the curve. Now that we have measured all of the POMs on the front of the garment, we will carefully turn the garment over to measure all POMs on the back of the garment. Ensure that when turning the garment, the high point shoulder stays in the exact same position. If you feel the need to mark with a pin or chalk to ensure this is done correctly, please feel free to do so, as we have done here. So now reposition your ruler. Measure all vertical specs. Center back neck drop is measured from high point shoulder to neck seam at center back. Center back body length is measured from center back neck seam to garment edge at center back. Across back at a specific placement from the center back neck seam. For this style, it is identified as 4 inches. Place your mark. Now measure seam to seam. Now that we have measured all body specs, we will move to measuring all sleeve specs. This time, when smoothing the armhole, we will ensure that garment is smooth following the armhole shape of the sleeve, not the body. Sleeve length is measured from armhole seam down to bottom edge of sleeve. Ensure that the forward shoulder seam is properly maintained at the armhole. For this style, it is 3/4. Also, ensure you are measuring over the fullness at the top of the sleeve cap. The muzzle is measured 1 inch below the armhole seam. Ensure that your measurement is taken perpendicular to the overarm fold. If not taken perpendicular to the overarm fold, your measurements will vary. The elbow width is measured 8 inches down from the armhole along the folded edge of the underside of the sleeve. Again, measure perpendicular to the overarm fold. The sleeve opening is measured from edge to edge. To measure the armhole, it must be done in 3 parts: front body, side panel, and back panel. First, you will slowly walk the tape measure along the front armhole curve. Now reposition your garment. Continue to walk your tape along the side panel armhole. Again, reposition your garment. And you will finish by walking your tape along the back panel armhole curve. All of these measurements added up to be 18 3/4. Keep in mind that the measurer needs to be extremely careful that the armhole is not being overstretched while taking this measurement. To measure collar specs, unbutton the garment and lay flat. Collar height at center back is measured from top of collar stand to top edge of collar. Collar stand height at center back is measured from center back neck seam to top of collar stand. Collar point is measured from top edge of collar to top edge of lapel. Lapel point is from front bottom edge of collar point to front edge of lapel. Lapel notch spread is from collar point to lapel point. And collar length at outer edge is along the top edge of the collar following the curve. Next, we will measure the pocket placement. Pocket from bottom edge at center front side is measured from the lowest edge of pocket to bottom hem. Measurement will be parallel to center front. For the horizontal placement, please note that we do not take our measurement from the center front. We measure it from the opening edge. Measure to seam.